The mystery of fear, why it's a powerful tool to transform your life. Have you ever felt your heart racing, your breath quickening, and your body freezing in the face of a situation? Have you ever wondered why we experience fear and whether it is an enemy or a friend in our lives? From great individuals who overcame fear to change the world to you, facing daily anxieties, fear is something that connects us all. In today's video, we will explore the psychology of fear, an emotion that has shaped survival, driven humanity through hardships, and remains one of our greatest personal challenges. What really happens in the brain when you're afraid? How can we transform fear into strength? And most importantly, why is fear not something to run from but a tool for growth? Join me as we uncover the answers through surprising stories and lessons. The psychology of fear. Fear is one of the most basic and powerful human emotions. It plays a vital role in our survival. But what really happens in the brain when we experience fear? And why is this feeling so deeply rooted in human instincts? Let's explore. When faced with danger, our body reacts instantly, thanks to a small but critical structure in the brain called the amygdala. This is the control center of fear response, located deep within the limbic system, which governs emotions and memory. When the amygdala detects a threat, it sends signals to the sympathetic nervous system, causing the heart to beat faster, breathing to quicken, and the body to prepare for one of two options, fight or flight. However, fear is not just a biological reaction. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, suggested that fear might stem from unconscious experiences. He called these ghosts of the past, referring to negative memories that, although we may not consciously remember them, subtly influence our behavior. For instance, someone bitten by a dog in childhood might not recall the incident but still feel inexplicably anxious around dogs. Additionally, recent psychological studies reveal that the hippocampus, another part of the brain, helps contextualize fear. While the amygdala detects danger, the hippocampus determines whether the threat is genuinely something to worry about. This explains why two people can react differently to the same situation. For example, someone who survived a car accident might panic upon hearing screeching brakes, while someone else remains unaffected. A famous story illustrating this comes from physicist Albert Einstein. As a child, Einstein was afraid of the dark. He described it to his mother as a bottomless abyss. However, instead of avoiding it, he used his curiosity to understand light and darkness. Ultimately, this fear inspired some of his groundbreaking discoveries in optics. Today, fear is no longer limited to biological threats like wild animals or natural disasters. We fear failure, rejection, or not meeting societal expectations. This is known as social fear, a type of fear that evolved alongside human society. The renowned psychologist Carl Rogers once said, "The deepest root of fear is not living true to oneself." This is why many people feel stressed in situations that demand recognition from others, such as public speaking. In summary, fear is not our enemy but an essential part of our survival instincts. Understanding how it operates in the brain and the subconscious can help us learn to control and harness it effectively. Stories of fear responses. History has witnessed countless moments where humans faced fear, and these stories not only reflect our survival instincts but also demonstrate extraordinary courage in overcoming fear. Let's begin with an example from World War II. During the dark days of the London Blitz, thousands of civilians sought refuge in underground shelters, a flight response to avoid aerial dangers. Meanwhile, soldiers on the battlefield confronted fear head-on, standing their ground to protect their country. This shows that fear can lead to different actions depending on the context and individual roles. Another story comes from ancient Greece. King Leonidas of Sparta and his 300 warriors faced the mighty Persian army at the Battle of Thermopylae. Despite knowing their defeat was inevitable, they did not flee. Leonidas famously said, "We fight not for victory but for the honor of our ancestors and the freedom of our descendants." This exemplifies the fight response to fear, where courage surpasses the instinct for survival. In everyday life, fear responses are equally visible. Imagine someone giving a public speech for the first time. Some might experience trembling hands, a shaky voice, and the urge to leave the stage immediately. This is the freeze response, where the body hesitates, unsure whether to fight or flee. Psychologist Susan Cain, author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, shared, Stage fright is one of the most common fears, but it's also an opportunity to build confidence. Sometimes, fear not only saves lives but also pushes us to discover our limits. Mountaineer George Mallory, who attempted to conquer Mount Everest, once said, "I don't climb mountains to escape fear. I climb to face it, to prove I can overcome myself." These historical and everyday stories show that fear is not merely a fleeting feeling but a test of inner strength. The key lies in how we choose to respond. Whether it's fleeing, fighting, or freezing, each reaction reflects not only instincts but also human values and willpower. Social perspectives and the impact of fear in modern society. Fear is not just a natural reaction to physical threats, but also a product of our social and cultural environment. Media, social networks, and everyday pressures amplify our fears, making them an inseparable part of life. But what truly causes this phenomenon, and how does it affect human behavior? Firstly, let's consider the role of media. In a world where news spreads rapidly, stories about crimes, natural disasters, or political conflicts often dominate headlines. Hans Rosling, journalist and author of Factfulness, explained that humans tend to focus on negative information because it activates the brain's alarm system, making us feel the need to pay attention for self-protection. However, he emphasized, the world is not as bad as we think. We are simply influenced by the way news is selected and presented. This leads to what is called manufactured fear, where people feel insecure even when no real danger exists. Apart from media, social pressure is another major source of fear. Psychologist Erich Fromm, in his work Escape from Freedom, pointed out that industrial society has created a new type of fear, the fear of isolation. Today, people worrying about not meeting societal standards, such as achieving career success, maintaining a certain image, or gaining acceptance from their community. This is a major cause of social anxiety disorders, where individuals feel judged in every action they take. A clear example is the fear of failure. In many cultures, failure is seen as shameful rather than as a necessary learning experience. Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb, once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." However, modern society, with constant comparisons on social media, makes many people see failure as the end, rather than a stepping stone to growth. Fear is also fueled by uncertainty, an unavoidable aspect of life. Philosopher Bertrand Russell once said, "Worrying is a waste of energy. It changes nothing except the way we view a problem." Yet in reality, many people feel anxious when they cannot completely control the future. This leads to fears in areas like finance, health, and even personal relationships. The impact of fear is not limited to individuals, it extends to the community. In society, fear can increase stigma, discrimination, and a lack of empathy. For instance, during the COVID-19 pandemic, fear of infection led many to ostracize patients or those from affected areas. This not only hurt individuals but also weakened societal solidarity. However, fear can also become a catalyst for positive change. Franklin D. Roosevelt, during the Great Depression, famously said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." His message inspired millions of Americans to overcome despair and rebuild their nation. This shows that fear is not just an obstacle but also an opportunity for individuals to face challenges and unlock their true potential. From a social perspective, fear is not merely a personal emotion but also a product of external influences. Understanding this can help us better manage emotions and encourage a more empathetic and resilient society. How to overcome fear? Fear, often considered a negative emotion, can become a driving force for growth if we learn to control it. But how can humans overcome fear? From traditional methods to modern therapies, there are countless ways to master this emotion. One of the most effective methods is practicing meditation. In Eastern philosophy, meditation is seen as a tool to achieve inner peace. Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The breath is the bridge between the body and mind." When you pay attention to your breath, you can calm all worries and fears. Meditation not only reduces stress but also improves focus, enabling us to face anxiety-inducing situations with greater composure. Beyond meditation, a modern approach is cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT). This psychological treatment helps change negative thought patterns associated with fear. For example, If you fear public speaking, CBT helps you analyze why you're afraid and gradually practice scenarios to acclimate yourself. A study from Stanford University found that CBT is highly effective in reducing symptoms of anxiety and fear. Additionally, fostering a positive mindset is crucial. According to psychologist Martin Seligman, founder of positive psychology, optimistic individuals are less affected by fear. They view failure not as an endpoint but as an opportunity to learn and grow. Most importantly, we need to recognize that no one can completely eliminate fear. But by understanding and befriending it, we can transform fear into a force that drives us to surpass our limits. Stories of fear in history and lessons learned. History has recorded many stories of fear, from wars and explorations to personal challenges. Each story not only illustrates how humans face fear, but also contains valuable lessons about courage and the will to overcome difficulties. Let's start with the story of Christopher Columbus, the Italian explorer who was determined to cross the ocean to find a new route to India. In the 15th century, the prevailing belief was that the earth was flat, and venturing far from land meant facing a bottomless abyss. The fear of his crew was not only from storms but also from the unknown. Columbus reassured them with his famous words, "You can never cross the ocean until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore." This spirit helped him and his crew overcome their fears and usher in a new era in human history. Another story comes from Malala Yousafzai, a young Pakistani girl who became a symbol of courage in the fight for women's right to education. At just 15 years old, Malala was attacked by the Taliban for speaking out. But instead of succumbing to fear, she confronted it and turned it into strength, fighting for millions of girls around the world. Malala once said, "Fear has no place in my life. Even when I feel afraid, I do not let it control me." Her story teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear but the ability to act despite it. Not only individuals but collective decisions have also been shaped by fear. During the Cold War, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. Leaders like John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev faced the fear that any wrong move could lead to global destruction. At a critical moment, Kennedy chose negotiation over escalation, saving the world from unimaginable consequences. Kennedy famously said, "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate." This shows that fear is not just an emotion but a test of wisdom and leadership. In the realm of science, there's the story of Marie Curie, the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. Curie faced the fear of society as she researched radioactivity, a completely new field at the time. Despite working in dangerous conditions without guarantees, Curie persisted. She once said, "Nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more, so that we may fear less." Her words emphasize the role of knowledge in overcoming fear. These stories show that fear is not a hindrance but a driving force that pushes humans to their limits. Whether it's Columbus, Malala, Kennedy, or Curie, they all used fear as a tool to explore, protect, and create. This proves that fear's true nature is not to hold us back, but to propel us forward. Social psychology and facing fear. Fear is not just an individual emotion, it has deep social implications. How we face fear affects not only ourselves but also those around us. In society, fear often spreads quickly, but it can also become a source of inspiration for unity and trust. Consider the story of the Black Death in Europe. When the plague spread in the 14th century, fear gripped everyone. People panicked, and in many cases, this fear led to stigmatization and scapegoating of minority groups. However, during this time, there were also stories of solidarity. In Venice, leaders established the world's first quarantine system to contain the disease, easing the community's fears. This demonstrates that when fear is managed correctly, it can drive positive action and protect society. Another example comes from the American Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, where fear was present not just in the African American community but across the United States. Martin Luther King Jr., a prominent leader of the movement, inspired millions with his message that fear was not an enemy but something to overcome. He said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Fear cannot drive out fear. Only love can do that." Through peaceful protests, King transformed the fear of the community into strength for justice. In social psychology, the concept of emotional contagion explains why fear can influence an entire group. When one person in a group feels anxious, this emotion easily spreads, especially in uncertain situations. However, this phenomenon can also have positive outcomes. If one person shows courage, it can inspire others to do the same. For example, during natural disasters like earthquakes or floods, those who take the first steps to help often motivate the entire community to overcome fear and rebuild together. Another key factor is the role of leadership in managing fear. Philosopher Plato once said, "A good leader is not one who eliminates fear but one who knows how to guide it." This holds true for leaders like Winston Churchill, who kept the British spirit unbroken during World War II with his declaration, "We shall never surrender, no matter the circumstances." Social psychology shows that how we face fear not only determines individual survival but also shapes communities. When properly controlled, fear can become a powerful tool to drive unity, action, and social progress. Fear and its transformation into strength. Fear, in many cases, is not something to eliminate, but a feeling to transform. History and psychology reveal that great individuals do not avoid fear, but use it as motivation to push beyond their limits and achieve extraordinary things. Take Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison for fighting apartheid in South Africa. Mandela was no stranger to fear. He admitted, "I have learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." A brave person is not someone who does not feel afraid but someone who conquers that fear. When he was released, Mandela did not let fear or hatred control him. Instead, he turned it into strength, leading his country toward peace and reconciliation. Similarly, in the arts and creativity, many geniuses have used fear as a source of inspiration. Vincent van Gogh, one of the greatest painters of all time, struggled with fear and mental instability throughout his life. Yet, he transformed these emotions into vibrant and powerful works like Starry Night. Van Gogh once wrote, "I often think that fear of failure is the greatest enemy of creativity. But if I don't face it, I'll never find freedom." In daily life, we see this transformation in athletes. Before a major competition, they often feel anxious and afraid of failure. However, they don't let fear control them, but instead use it as fuel to perform better. Legendary boxer Muhammad Ali said, "I'm not the man who is not afraid. But I've learned how to make fear work for me instead of letting it stop me." In psychology, the concept of productive fear describes how some people use fear to improve themselves. For example, fear of failure at work can motivate someone to work harder, or fear of losing a relationship can encourage them to nurture it. This doesn't mean living in fear but rather accepting it as part of the growth process. The key to transforming fear lies in changing how we perceive it. Psychologist Carol Dweck, known for her theory on growth mindset, argues that fear often stems from a fixed mindset, the fear of being judged or failing. When we adopt a growth mindset, fear becomes an opportunity to learn and improve. For example, if you fear public speaking, instead of thinking you're not good enough, view it as a chance to hone your communication skills and build confidence. Fear can also inspire social change. Greta Thunberg, a young environmental activist, transformed her fear of climate change into the Global Fridays for Future movement, rallying millions of people worldwide. Greta said, "They tell me I shouldn't be afraid. But I want them to be as afraid as I am, because fear drives action." These stories show that fear is not a weakness but an essential part of life. The important thing is not to avoid fear but to learn how to use it to foster personal growth, inspire others, and create positive changes in the world. Thank you for following along with this journey into the psychology of fear. If this content resonated with you and you'd like to explore more about psychology, life philosophy, and overcoming challenges, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Future videos will delve deeper into stories, perspectives, and lessons to help you not only conquer fear but also discover the true meaning of life. See you in the next journey.